the Chef Naz podcast with Zack and Noah.
Welcome to the Chef Naz podcast. I'm Joe, and I'm your host today for
Worship Wednesday.
welcome in. It's time for Pastor Zack and Noah.
Oh boy.
It's maybe a little later in the day than we normally record. I don't know if you can tell that or not. But
wow.
Zack, you seem to be in a pretty good mood.
I'm in a pretty good mood, Joe. I need a minute to breathe. You got me laughing so hard.
Well, that's great. Can't say we don't have a good time around here.
Not, you'd be a liar. A big old liar.
Well, you know, before we started to record, we did not talk at all about what we were going to do on this podcast.
No, we didn't.
So,
Oh my goodness.
just take a deep breath. It'll be okay.
I need it. Joe, you got me with that one.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know on this podcast, it's a weekly thing where we will just have conversations that make us chuckle. And Joe just eventually hits record, usually while I'm in the middle of crying. But welcome to Worship Wednesday.
Yeah.
As you've come to expect. This is par for the course for us, buddy. So what we did want to talk about is something that I don't think we ever really touched deeply on this in the podcast, but for those of you who don't know, I just got ordained. Whoop, whoop. Caleb Aylshire, your son, also got ordained.
He did. And you were the last in the bunch, and he was the first.
Yeah.
So you completely bookended that thing.
We sandwiched it.
It was nice. And then at the very end, you all got to come up, and you guys stood there together, and I took little pictures. That was nice.
Remind me to show you. I got 2 really good pictures of me and him hugging. It was
Nice.
It was good. I'll have to send them to you.
Pretty excited about that.
Yes, but so what? I didn't just want to do a whole podcast where I brag about me being ordained. That's not what
I'm a reverend.
Hello, I am Elder Zachary Robert Zaborski.
Yes.
You may address me as so. Please, no, don't do that. And there have been a few people asking, like, what do we call you? I was like, you call me Zach. It's fine. I'm sweating. Sorry. You got me laughing so hard. The thermal ain't doing it no more, buddy.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Thanks for that, Joe.
You're welcome.
But so I have gone through this process, and now Noah is starting this process.
Oh, so this is meant to encourage Noah as you tell him about your experiences.
Yes. I'll leave out some of them too.
Let's see how this unfolds.
Maybe we'll keep my mouth shut more or so then.
Yeah.
No, but the main thing here's why this conversation gets brought up. Because I've talked to and are friends with a lot of worship leaders that are not necessarily pastors, if that makes sense, right? So they're really good musicians. Their hearts are on fire for Jesus. There's no denying their faith.
Just called the music ministry.
Just called a music ministry, exactly. And so, you know, I've been asked quite a few times, especially at the beginning of this journey all those years ago, you know, like, well, why do you want to get ordained? You know, I was like, well, I just feel like God's calling me to be a pastor in the church in Nazarene. They can't be a worship leader. You don't have to go through this process to do what you do. And I really wish they never told me that because there have been.
Because that rattled around in your head several times, right?
Unfortunately, it was a bell off in the distance of so many thoughts.
You know, you don't have to do this.
Right. But I think that's the difference between what Noah and I do versus what other people who are just called to music ministry do. And that's fine. You know, I'm not bashing anybody's calling. But I remember when this got brought up to me for the very first time, and I'm thinking like, you know, again, I didn't grow up in a Nazarene church. So they're like explaining to me like, oh yeah, I do these classes and you get ordained at the end. I was like, I don't know what that means.
Right.
Is it like a college thing? No, not exactly. You could do it and get college credit, but you don't have to. You know, I was just asking.
Or you could go to college and still have to do more.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of times where I was just trying to figure it out. And when I sat down and Chris and I were talking about it, we were praying through it. And I've mentioned this before on the podcast, like I'm not going to be relevant as a worship leader forever. And who knows how actually long I have left. You know, I'm getting up there. And I never just want to be the guy that hangs on to the one thing I'm good at, right? And God has given me a call to preach. I've gotten the opportunity a few times to preach and to pastor people. And I think that's the biggest difference of why I want to do this journey, is because I don't want to just be a good song leader. I want to be a good pastor. I want to pastor the people of this team and know how to help them grow in the relationship with Jesus and not just grow as instrumentalists.
Right.
My heart is for both. I want you to get better as a musician, but really at the end of the day, I don't care how good you are at your instrument if you don't have a good relationship with Jesus. Like that's the most important thing to me. And so I started the journey, and it's been a long one. It's been an interesting one, and we will not have to talk about all that here on the podcast. But even thinking back to when I had my interview for ordination, it's like the final thing where you've done all your classes. Now you got to sit before this board, and they ask you, a lot of sometimes difficult questions to answer. And a couple of them that they asked, I remember thinking back to when I finished the first program that I did, and had I not continued and went back and redid some of those classes, I wouldn't have the knowledge to answer their questions the way I do now. And it kind of hit me in the interview process, like, yeah, it was not fun to have to do it twice, and it was expensive and lost a lot of time with my family. You make sacrifices when you do stuff like that.
Right.
But I'm honestly really glad that God did it that way now, because I learned twice as much as I would have. I got twice the experience, twice the information. I now know way more people in the Nazarene church than I would have had I not had to go back and do it again. And it was like God in that moment took away all of the resentment and frustration that I had been, going into that interview, like, Zach, don't even go down the rabbit trail because you're going to freak out and go off on somebody, right? And it was just God kind of being like, yeah, no, I knew what I was doing. He's like, I know you didn't, and you didn't like it, but had you not gone through what you went through, you would not be the man you are now. So I'm super grateful.
And this goes back some years. I mean, for people that aren't aware of the process, there's a process called ordination, and at its very core, what the idea of the concept is that first of all, we want to have a body of leaders that has been called by God to be a leader.
Yep.
And then we believe as a body that if God has called you, and you're convinced that God has called you, that calling will also be recognized by other people, that other people will say, you know what, he's right. God is calling him into that position. And so then we want you to have the educational background, because if you're going to have the responsibility of leading someone, we want you to be able to lead them in the right way and not lead them astray. And then specifically for the Nazarene Church, and every denomination kind of has their different procedures of how they do ordination. And on the surface, I think that the Nazarene Church is one of the more strenuous as far as the ordination process. And because of that, it may at times, I'm sure, get frustrating if you're going through it. But in the end, we end up with a body of leaders that, like, we are all committed to the same purpose, the same goal, moving the same direction.
Exactly.
And there's a certain amount of trust that can be put in someone who has proven themselves in front of their peers that this is what I believe, and this is the way I will teach people given the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And so there is reason for all that. We don't want people to be led astray. We don't want false teaching to enter the church. And so you have to have, however awful it feels when you're going through it, I think of it in terms of like working out. There's times if you go to the gym and you're doing weights and so forth, it doesn't feel that great. And in fact, the day after, it may feel even worse. Right. But what you're working towards an end goal of where you want to be. I want to be healthy. I want to be strong. And so I understand that there's certain discipline that's going to go into that process to make that happen.
Yep.
So for you, what was that like? I mean, when you're given the question,
I'm just kidding.
when you're given the question really of like, as you said, you're a quote worship leader. So why do you feel like, I needed to take this path of ordination where many who are worship leaders don't?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing was, again, how do I want to say this? In this whole process of even doing what I'm doing, I can't remember the speaker that said this. It was at Overflow, you might remember. But he was talking all about how a lot of worship people make their job their identity. And like, this is who I am. And without it, I am nothing. And I never saw myself like that. Thankfully, I think I was just like, I'm just a son of the King, you know?
Yeah.
That's my identity. I'm a son of the King, and I want to learn more about him, and I want to grow in my knowledge of him, and specifically of why I love the Nazarene church, right? And again, one of the process, like, I think the beauty of this process that, again, like you said, when you're in the middle of it, you're not thinking this. But that whole process of all these classes that you take really help refine, like, okay, do I actually believe this? Because there was times where the stuff would get brought up in our classes. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of the first time I'm hearing about this. How do I really feel about that? And it like allowed me, even through like studying for the papers and all that, it was like, oh no, I do agree with this. And here's the biblical reason why I agree with this. It's not just some rule or thing that they made up. It just allows you to figure out, do I really align with this?
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's, like you were saying, it's a great process to have, because you don't want to put somebody through this whole process, spit them out, and they're like, oh yeah, I don't actually know if I agree with the Nazarene church. So what am I doing here? But yeah, for me, it was just, it was an identity thing. It was like, I'm a father of the King, and I know I'm not going to be a worship pastor forever. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I was working at Grove City was from my boss, Zack O'Day, and he was teaching me a lot of recording stuff and how we use Logic was the software. And he taught me how to use Logic for recording and tracking and all that. And I remember one day just being like so bored and frustrated, like, we've been sitting on this software for like 2 weeks now, dude. Like, I think I got it. I know enough about it. And he could sense that I was getting mad. And he's like, you know why I'm doing this, Zach? I was like, no, at this point I don't, because it's really frustrating and annoying. And he's like, you should never, ever be just a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
He's like, you, especially in ministry, diversifying yourself and not just being the one thing, right? Because there could be a day, especially when you're a worship leader and musician. Like, I think of the one preacher that was there at Overflow. You weren't there that year, sorry. I think you guys were there. The guy that didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
And he could barely preach. And he, for years, was a worship pastor. And he sang, and that's what he did. And then his voice went away. And I was like, so if my only identity is a singer and a worship leader, and my voice suddenly goes, it's like, what do I have? Nothing. So, but if I am just looking at myself as a father of the King.
What you mean?
Son of the
child,
King.
Yeah, child of the King. That's what you meant.
Yep. I am not the father of any kings.
Well, I mean, I really buy into that myself.
Yeah.
Like my identity is not like tech or music or computers or whatever. It is just like, I want to serve. Yeah. I want to serve the King. And so in whatever capacity that opens up, if I'll give it my all. I mean, we'll see what happens.
Exactly.
But I'm willing to do it.
Yeah.
All right. So Noah, you have decided to embark on this same trail. Kind of how you're at the beginning stages of this. Zach's at the ending stage of this, kind of like the before and after picture. I'm
sorry.
So, to walk us through the process for you, right now, I'll just give a little bit of context. So there's kind of multiple levels before you get to the final boss. The final boss is the GS at the very end.
Right.
But you have the church has locally licensed you. And so that's something that happens at the local church. And then eventually there's a district license, which recognizes kind of a more expanding role of within the district, you being a pastor. And then eventually, as you're walking through this process, you will become an ordained elder of the church. And at that point, like this is kind of credentialed for the global church of the Nazarene. So that's not an easy undertaking. So kind of tell us about your process and maybe why you felt that was also the path for you.
Yeah. So right now I'm locally licensed by Shepherd, and I just started within the past couple months classes through. I took one at Mount Vernon, but then their whole thing shut down. So now I'm at Nazarene Bible College or NBC, and so I'm working towards my district license, which hopefully, if stuff works out well, I should hopefully have it next year. If not, be the year after that. But I kind of chose this path because, I really do believe in local church ministry. Like I really do think it's, obviously it's God's church and we are the bride of Christ in this kind of like, not format, but like this kind of community is that. And I do a lot of outside like parachurch ministry. And I feel like I'm called to this specifically ordained in the Nazarene just for that. Kind of as almost like a connection between the two. Like I think people may start ministries outside of the local church because of like either like church hurt or they feel like they can do it better than the church. And I don't think that's right. I think it's in my opinion, not everything I say is the truth or anything, but
what?
I don't believe you.
And I think if we put our attentions and focuses together, we'd be a lot farther and we could get a lot farther. So I don't know what I want to do forever. I know it's not lead worship. I don't know if that's like a surprise to anybody, but like I don't want to lead worship forever. Like that's just what I feel called to do now. Yeah. And that's how I can serve the local church to the best of my ability now. And I love music. I love worship. And so that's how I'm used now. But I kind of want to bridge this gap between like the parachurch ministries and the church ministries so that it's not these two forces like against each other. And, the parachurch is great at what it does and the local church is good at what it does. And so if we could kind of bridge the gap between the two of like, hey, let's work together, not separate because, I'm angry with the church. So I need to reach as many people as I can here. Because they're both good at what they do. So if we could bridge the gap between them, I think that'd be, so that's kind of why I want to get ordained. I have a huge call to ministry and to preach and to lead the kind of, I don't know, I have my hand in so many different areas. Like I love young adults right now because I am one and I love leading that and I love homeless people. I really do. And so I have my hand in a lot and I love leading worship. So to be able to, I don't know necessarily where God's going to put me long-term or permanently, but I think that's kind of my mindset right now is that if I can serve the local church to the best of my ability, I think that's by getting ordained and by starting that process. And so
it's good, man. That's good. Yeah. Again, like we were just talking about, you just have a heart to serve in whatever area you're needed. And it's just cool that you're willing to do that. So keep up the good work.
All right. Anything else you want to share?
Not that I can think of.
All right. Well, As you're listening today,
What?
I guess not. You might be thinking, oh, I wonder if God has something for me. And, you know, there are plenty of people that get called into ministry later in life. Sometimes we see people that, you know, from a teenager, they feel called into ministry, but it may be something that happens in your middle age or even in your senior years. And I encourage you to be willing to take that step to find out what God has for you next. You can always email us at podcast@shepnaz.org. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For Pastor Zack and Noah, I'm Joe. Have a great day. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.